Hello everyone and welcome back. And before we begin, I have two things to say. Number one, let me know what you think of the brand new room. And number two, we're gonna have a lot to talk about throughout this next week because there's just a lot of videos I had planned, but the upload process got slowed down a little bit, so there's going to be a lot to talk about this week. But before we get into all that, I wanted to start off this week with something positive before I go back to having to rip a whole bunch of stuff a new asshole, because, as I said, there's a lot to talk about this week. But I did recently see John Wick 3, and I really wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about this. And what did I think of the movie? Well, needless to say, unlike a certain overhyped, overly long 3-hour piece of shit, John Wick 3 did not disappoint. It was everything I hoped it would be, and it was so good, and I'm so glad that I saw this movie, especially after the goddamn disappointment that was Endgame, that just left me feeling so empty after I saw it. This movie was just so goddamn exciting and fun, and it's just... Keanu Reeves has created something special, and I'm so glad that we all get to experience it. And all I have to say is, Keanu Reeves, you have already surpassed Schwarzenegger and Stallone. You are getting up there, Reeves, as one of the best badasses and action stunt actors of all time. Just keep it up, and soon you'll be right up there with Bruce Lee. You are the man right now, Keanu Reeves. And these movies are great, and I'm so excited at the announcement that there's going to be a fourth one on the way. This is one of the greatest franchises, especially considering all the garbage that has been getting released recently. Now, most of this is going to be spoiler-free, unlike Endgame, so this is probably going to be a little bit more shorter than my Endgame review. However, again, if you all want a more in-depth review, let me know, and when the movie comes out on DVD, that can be arranged. Now, needless to say, the action in this movie was incredible. It is just as good as ever. In fact, it might possibly be better than the action in the first two movies, because we get such a great variety. We get a whole lot more sword fights and just all kinds of new weapons. Like, one of the first action sequences, I won't say too much, but it takes place in a room with a whole bunch of like medieval weapons and throwing knives. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. If not, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sure you can use your imagination to fill in the blanks, but it was so good. And the first action scene is probably one of the most unique action sequences, especially in regards to how it ends. I won't say, but it is really good and really brutal. And that is a theme with a lot of the action scenes in John Wick 3. They are so much more brutal than we have ever seen before. Like, John Wick has always had some pretty brutal action, but John Wick 3, without question, has the most brutal action sequences. Like, they remind me of like a lot of the action scenes that were in the Raid movies, which is pretty good because those movies had incredible action. And with these, they're just, not only are they really beautifully choreographed, but they're just so goddamn brutal. Every time you see a hit, it just feels so vicious. And some of the ways that people get executed in this movie, it's just like, all you can think is, holy fucking shit. And I love that we get a whole lot more variety, whereas the first two was mostly just fist fights and gunfights. This one, we get so much more. We get some stuff involving dogs, we get a whole lot more blades involved, and it's so much fun. It really is. And of course, the actors, including Keanu Reeves, is as good as ever. John Wick is a fantastic character, and Keanu Reeves plays this character so well. This truly is his character, and depending on like how big this franchise becomes, I don't think I could ever see anyone else possibly portraying this character but Keanu Reeves because of how well he plays it. And some of the other performances were actually pretty surprisingly good, like Halle Berry, which I was surprised to see her do such a good job in this movie, because she's been in such bad movies like Catwoman, which is one of the worst movies ever made, and I was surprised to see her do so well in this movie. She brings a lot of emotion to the role, and she is just as badass as John Wick in this movie. In fact, there's a big action scene between the two, and both these actors complement each other really well. Like, it's not like one is just more badass than the other, or one is holding the other back. They feel like equals, and it's so good to see, and I would be interested in seeing more of her in this franchise. And of course, Lawrence Fishburne just kills it. He oozes so much charisma in every single frame he is in. This is probably my favorite Lawrence Fishburne role. He's so good, he's so entertaining. I love the guy, and it's always fun to see Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne come back to work on a movie together. And my only small complaint, the complaints or negatives I have about this movie are extremely small, and this is an example of one. As good as Lawrence Fishburne is in this movie, I wish we got more of him. This movie needed a little bit more Lawrence Fishburne because he's so good, he's so entertaining, and I wish we could have gotten at least one action scene. Unfortunately, we don't get an action scene with Lawrence Fishburne, which does feel like a little bit of a cock tease, I won't lie. Hopefully, maybe that'll change in the fourth one, I hope, but even without that, he is still so damn entertaining. And another thing I really love about this movie is the villains. The villains in this movie are so far the best villains in the John Wick franchise. They are so, like, the villains beforehand felt more like cowards, and they just don't really do a whole lot. Like, once, like, John Wick gets to them, you know they're fucked, and you know there's nothing that they can do, and I've never really been the biggest fan of, like, coward villains, but these guys are damn near unstoppable. Like, when they first show up, they just start massacring people like they're absolutely nothing, and in fact, they are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous at times, than John Wick, and he really pushes John Wick's character to his limits. And in fact, the main thing I like about the villains is we eventually find out the main antagonist is John Wick's equal. Like, he finally met his equal. And it's very interesting to get to actually sit down with the villain and learn a little bit more about him, rather than him just being another asshole to kill. And I really love that. I'm always more fascinated with villains when they feel more like an equal, or they have some kind of connection with the main protagonist, rather than just being some baddie for the villain to kill. The villains don't feel like this here. They actually complement the protagonist very well, which is what a good antagonist should be, and they are just such good villains, and I really enjoy the main antagonist in this movie so much, and I really hope the fourth one gives us some more great antagonists. And the plot, for the most part, I won't say too much about it, but it's about John Wick trying to get his excommunicado that he got from the sequel, he wants to get rid of it so he can once again be free from violence. And can he accomplish his mission of once again setting himself free? And I'll leave it there for the most part because I really don't want to ruin this movie for people because it really is worth it. Unlike Endgame, where the movie is so goddamn disappointing and so cliche and predictable, there's nothing to spoil. Here, there actually is some interesting turns and twists that the movie takes, and it definitely, like, there are times where you think the characters are gonna do one thing, but they don't. So thankfully the movie does leave you guessing, and it's not cliche in the slightest, which thank God for that. And the music is once again pretty good. Now, it's definitely not the most epic music ever. I mean, if you know me, you definitely know that one thing I know is epic music. However, it is still good music. One thing I would like to see, I would actually like to see Keanu Reeves try to work out where they could use Juno Reactor again. If you don't know who Juno Reactor are, they're a group that makes some pretty interesting and epic music. And if you watch my channel religiously, you've probably heard a little bit of their music because I like to use it from time to time because it's so good. But they did use some of Juno Reactor's music in The Matrix, and I would like to see that they could bring Juno Reactor back, possibly in John Wick 4, because I feel that this movie could greatly benefit from Juno Reactor's music, and if you've heard their music, you'd probably understand why, and I would love to see some of that epic music come back in this franchise and kind of bring things full circle, because they had some Juno Reactor music in The Matrix, and we do come back to this movie, which actually does make references to The Matrix, and we do get Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne back. I do think it would be interesting to possibly bring back that music. Now, does the movie really need it? Probably not, but it would be nice to see again. And this movie is shot pretty damn well. So, what else about this movie kicks ass? Because this movie really is good, and at the same time, I'm trying to think of negatives for this movie, but I really can't. And it's also really hard to, like, name some negatives, because one of the only couple negatives I could think of, one of them would involve me spoiling something, but again, I don't want to do that. If I had to pick a negative, I would have to say that as good as most of the action sequences are, there are times where the action sequences can get a little bit repetitive. For example, this doesn't exactly spoil anything, but there is a fight scene in the movie where we see John Wick get knocked into like some glass cases, and like the first couple of times it's like pretty brutal, but then they do it a few more times and it's like, okay, how many more times is he gonna get knocked into these glass casings? And you just are getting a little bit nervous because you think this is starting to get a little bit comedic. Thankfully, though, it's not really a bad thing. It's more of like a minor thing, and the action sequences are so good and again so brutal, you forget about it pretty quickly. And really, I don't mind any excuse to have these action sequences go on for a long time, because they really are amazing to watch and they are the highlight of the movie. And some of these action sequences are pretty long. Sometimes that can be a bad thing, but for the most part it works here because they're so well choreographed. So that would be one of the only like legit negatives I could think of, outside of like minor things like the movie needing more Lawrence Fishburne, or something really sad that happens at one part of the movie that, again, I won't spoil, but yeah. So really, I think that's all I could think of for now. So this is actually going to be a first for my channel in my series of reviews. I'm going to give this movie the very first 10 out of 10 score on my channel. This movie is a freaking masterpiece. Sure, I could probably nitpick a couple of things, but really, that would just be me nitpicking for the sake of trying to find the most tiny flaws. But this movie really is a masterpiece. This is without question the best movie of the year. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to say, but Endgame, yeah, no, Endgame can go fuck itself. That movie was disappointing. This movie is exciting. The action scenes are so good. It doesn't disappoint. It's not generic. It's not cliche. It has characters that you care about and want to see succeed. And I just love everything about this movie. It's so good. I cannot recommend it enough. Please, anyone who's watching, if you're thinking about going to the movies and you're thinking about maybe seeing Endgame or something stupid like that, go see John Wick 3 instead. It is worth the price of admission. Unlike Endgame, where I honestly would not advise people to go see it because it's really not worth the price of admission. I would say wait for it to come out on DVD and rent it because it's just not worth it. But this movie is worth it. This is the type of movie you want to experience on the big screen. And yeah, so my final score is the first 10 out of 10. And I cannot wait for John Wick 4. But what did you all think? Did any of you see John Wick 3? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys around tomorrow.